Eala looks stunning at the Laureus World Sports Awards 2026. This event was attended by world-class athletes, but Alex definitely stole the spotlight with her stunning look and dress. She represented the Philippines. Wow.
The camera caught it first. A white gown, ivory, moving through the Laureus Awards 2026 red carpet like it owned the entire building. Every head turned, every lens followed, and for a moment, just a moment, the room forgot there were Olympic champions standing in it. That was Alex Eala, the girl from the Philippines.
I'll wear what's called the Filipiniana, and it's a very traditional Filipino formal wear.
The same girl the tennis world spent 2 years dismissing, debating, doubting, right up until she started dismantling WTA top 30 opponents on hard court and made the entire establishment go very quiet. She didn't just show up, she detonated. The demand hit before the ceremony even ended. The fashion world was in a state nobody had predicted. Style editors filing emergency copy. Luxury accounts are crashing. Filipino fans are flooding comment sections in numbers that broke notification systems. And then came the 4 words that shocked everyone. The brand confirmed it publicly. Sold out. Gone. Completely. Within hours of that red carpet appearance. If you're watching this channel, you already know this story runs far deeper than a dress. Subscribe before we get into what nobody else is reporting. Because the part that comes next, that's the part that changes everything.
My uncle Alex Eala, amazing, and I felt like a princess.
But before we get into exactly what happened that night, and why the fashion world is still processing it weeks later, you need to understand who Alex Eala actually is. Because the mainstream sports media has been criminally lazy about telling this story properly. She was born on May 23, 2005 in Manila. Raised in a country where tennis is not the dominant sport, not the national obsession, not the automatic career path for gifted athletes. She was supposed to be an outlier, a curiosity. The Philippines had produced basketball players, boxers, weightlifters, but a genuine world-class tennis prospect from that soil was something nobody in the global tennis establishment had penciled into their projections. Then she started winning. At 13, she was already training with the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, one of the most selective and prestigious development programs in world tennis. The academy doesn't accept sentiment. It doesn't accept potential on a brochure. You earn your place through results, through work ethic, through the kind of mental resilience that most junior players simply do not have at that age. Eala had it. She started collecting ITF junior titles. Then came the 2022 US Open Girls Singles title, one of the 4 Grand Slam junior championships, the ones that actually signal to the wider tennis world that a player is not just talented, but structurally capable of competing at the highest level. She won it on hard court in New York, the most demanding surface in terms of pace and physical intensity. She was 17 years old. The Philippines noticed, the entire country noticed. Social media traffic on her name after that US Open win broke records for Filipino sports coverage. She wasn't just a tennis player anymore, she was a symbol of something much larger, proof that a young woman from Southeast Asia could walk into the most competitive sporting arena on the planet and come out with a title around her neck. Then she turned professional, and the doubts started. This is the part the tennis establishment will not acknowledge honestly. The transition from dominant junior to credible WTA professional is where careers end quietly. The tour is brutal. The margins are microscopic. Players who dismantled opponents in juniors arrive on the main tour and discover that every single person on the other side of the net is also exceptional. And most of them have been exceptional for longer. Eala struggled. She was honest about it publicly. Her ranking fluctuated. There were early round losses that generated commentary from the kind of tennis pundits who treat setbacks as verdicts rather than data points. Some of those voices suggested she had plateaued. A few went further and implied the junior success had been misleading, that perhaps the hype had arrived before the substance. She kept working. By 2024, the results started shifting in ways that were impossible to dismiss. She reached the quarterfinals of the Lion Open, a WTA 250 event on clay. She pushed top 20 players to 3 sets on multiple occasions. Her serve, always her most dangerous weapon, was clocking consistently at speeds that placed her among the hardest hitters on the tour. Her movement had improved. Her decision-making under pressure, the precise quality those pundits had questioned, was visibly sharper. Then 2025 arrived, and the trajectory became undeniable. She recorded wins over players ranked inside the top 30. Her WTA ranking climbed into territory that confirmed she was no longer a promising young player on the fringes of the conversation. She was inside it, competing week to week with players who had been on tour for a decade. The tennis world adjusted its tone. Not generously, not quickly, but it adjusted. Through all of it, the Filipino fan base never wavered. That is not a small thing. Filipino sports fans travel. They fill stadiums, they stay awake at impossible hours to watch matches being played in European time zones. They bring noise and color and identity to tournaments that have historically been dominated by European and American audiences. When Eala plays, the Philippine flag appears courtside. It appears in stands across the tour. It appears in the comment sections under match highlights at 2 in the morning Manila time. That relationship between Eala and her fanbase is the invisible architecture underneath everything that happened at the Laureus Awards 2026. The Laureus World Sports Awards have been running since 2000. They are genuinely the closest thing sport has to an Oscar ceremony. Attended by multi-sport legends, broadcast globally, and structured around celebrating athletic achievement across every discipline. The 2026 edition brought together figures from Formula One, football, athletics, swimming, and gymnastics. The room was, by any objective measure, one of the most decorated sporting gatherings on the calendar. Eala attended as a rising figure in tennis, not as a headline act, not as a Laureus nominee, as part of the broader sporting community that the event draws into its orbit. And she arrived wearing a white gown designed by a Filipino fashion house. A deliberate choice, not a coincidence, not a stylist's accident. That decision is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating. The gown was ivory, floor length, structured at the shoulders, fluid through the body. It moved with a kind of architectural confidence that photographers instinctively understand, the kind of garment that reads clearly from a distance, that frames its wearer rather than competing with them. On a red carpet filled with athletes wearing the predictable wardrobe of global sponsorship deals and borrowed luxury pieces, it was completely singular. The photographs went out on wire services before the ceremony began. Fashion editors in Paris, Milan, and New York were tagging the images within minutes. The accounts that cover red carpet style at this level, accounts with audiences in the millions, were posting before Eala had taken her seat inside the venue. The commentary was immediate, and it was not polite surprise. It was a genuine shock. The word being used repeatedly across multiple platforms was stunning. Not in the diluted social media sense, in the original sense, the sense of something that stops you mid-scroll and makes you look twice. Within the tennis community specifically, the reaction carried an additional layer. This was a sport that has always had style icons. Serena Williams redefined what power and presence looked like on a tennis court. Roger Federer made Wimbledon whites feel like haute couture, and Anna Kournikova in the late 1990s demonstrated how a player's cultural reach could extend far beyond match results. But none of those moments originated from a Filipino athlete, and none of them triggered the specific combination of sporting credibility and fashion authority that Eala produced in that single appearance. The demand for the gown began as a trickle and became a flood within 4 hours. People were searching for the designer. They were landing on the brand's website in volumes the infrastructure was not built to handle. Transaction attempts were stacking up simultaneously. The brand's social media team was responding to thousands of inquiries about availability, about sizing, and about international shipping. By the time the Laureus ceremony was entering its final hour, the inventory situation had already become critical. The brand released a statement. It was brief, it was direct. It confirmed what thousands of people refreshing product pages were already discovering through the most frustrating possible user experience. The gown was gone. Every unit, every size. The waiting list that had been opened as a contingency measure filled within the same evening. Sold out. The fashion world did not process this quietly. Trade publications that cover luxury and designer markets ran pieces within 48 hours, framing the sellout as a significant commercial event, not just a viral moment, but evidence of a new kind of consumer demand that follows athletes who occupy crossover cultural space. The argument being made in those pieces was specific. Eala had not been dressed by a stylist executing a brand partnership strategy. She had made a deliberate choice to wear a Filipino designer to one of sport's most visible occasions, and the market had responded to that authenticity in a way that calculated celebrity placements frequently fail to produce. That distinction matters enormously for anyone trying to understand why this story has legs beyond a single news cycle. The fashion world being shocked is the surface reading. The deeper reading is about what this moment reveals regarding the structural shift happening in how athletic celebrity translates into cultural authority. For most of the 20th century, that translation required time. An athlete needed years of dominance, followed by careful brand architecture, followed by media exposure outside sport, before they could generate the kind of cultural response Eala produced at 20 years old in a single evening. The acceleration of that process is partly technological. Social media compresses timelines that used to take careers to traverse, but it is also about authenticity. The Filipino fan base did not respond to a marketing campaign. They responded to a young woman from Manila standing in the most glamorous room in world sport, wearing a Filipino designer, having earned the right to be in that room through years of work on tennis courts across 3 continents. That combination, the achievement, the identity, the deliberate cultural statement, is what drove the demand to the point of a complete sellout. It is also worth noting what Eala did not do that evening. She did not give a speech about representation. She did not pose for photographs with a flag. She did not issue statements about the significance of her presence. She simply showed up wearing exactly what she chose to wear and allowed the weight of the moment to speak entirely through action. For a fan base that has watched her navigate dismissal and doubt for years without public complaint, that restraint landed harder than any statement could have. The weeks following the Laureus Awards, 2026 saw the story extend in directions that confirmed it had moved beyond a single viral moment. International fashion media began covering Eala as a subject in her own right, not as a tennis player who happened to look good at an event, but as a figure whose aesthetic choices carried cultural significance worth analyzing. Requests for interviews from publications that do not typically cover sports started arriving. The Filipino fashion house behind the white gown received international stockist inquiries from retailers in Europe and Asia who had not previously carried the brand. The tennis circuit absorbed all of this and continued turning. Eala returned to competition. The tour does not pause for fashion moments or cultural milestones. Rankings points are earned on court, not on red carpets, and she is too serious a competitor to allow external noise to displace the work that actually matters to her. But the Laureus Awards 2026 changed something permanent in how the wider world perceives her. The fashion world being shocked into a complete sellout in a single evening, driven by demand from a global audience that was watching a Filipino athlete claim space in a room full of champions. That is not a story that fades, it compounds. Every appearance she makes from this point carries a weight that did not exist before that night. Every match result lands in a context that is now broader than tennis. The sport has gained something in her that it did not know it was getting. A player whose reach extends into cultural conversations that tennis has historically struggled to enter. The girl from Manila walked into the Laureus Awards 2026 wearing ivory fabric and the confidence of someone who understood exactly what she was doing. The room turned, the lenses followed. The fashion world was shocked. The white gown sold out before the evening ended. None of it was an accident. And if you have watched this channel long enough, you already know that we called this trajectory before it became obvious. We connected the dots on Eala when the mainstream tennis media was still writing qualifier round previews. We covered the junior titles, the academy years, the professional grind, the ranking climb, and the cultural force building quietly underneath all of it. If this is your first time here, you are arriving at exactly the right moment. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell. Because the Laureus moment was not the peak of this story. Based on everything we are tracking, it was the opening act. The next chapter of what Alex Eala is building, on the court and far beyond it, is already in motion. You do not want to piece it together from highlights after the fact. You want to be here as it happens.